Hello and welcome back to the channel, the day that we've all been waiting for, the day that we all get called racist. It's finally happened. So without further ado, let's get into the story. Predictably, the Lord of the Rings of Power executive producer calls critics racist because, of course, the Lord of the Rings of Power executive producer Lindsay Weber predictably decided to attack Lord of the Rings and Tolkien fans as racist. Weber made it abundantly clear that the production and show would be eschewing Tolkien's works when she told Vanity Fair in February it only felt natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's works would reflect what the world actually looks like now. So that she's talking about making this a modern twist, a modern interpretation of Tolkien with modern ideas and modern issues injected, like modern identity politics. Months after making it extremely clear that the show would not be following Tolkien's works, Weber is now accusing critics of racism. She told Time magazine, "We're all up for criticism, but we're not up for racism." Well, apparently they're not actually up for criticism, because anytime any fan uses Tolkien's own words to tell them this is not in the canon and we don't understand why you're doing this, then they simply call it racism or they call it misogyny. Yeah, and this is exactly why they take people and they race swap them or they gender swap them, because then they know that they've got a free pass to do this. Because if you say anything about it, if you say anything about, like, for example, taking Black Canary and literally turning her from a white woman with blonde hair into a black woman, then you're just going to get called racist. But, you know, the point is someone saying, hey, you're not following the comic book at all. Now, is it a big deal? I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, I think as long as the character is well written and they do a good job with the character, then I'm okay with it. But some of this stuff is just blatant pandering, right? And like, they're literally so unimaginative. If they see a character with the word black in it, they think, oh, let's make this a black person. I mean, that's what comes to their mind. Everything is race for these people. Everything is, you know, how can we race swap something? How can we gender swap someone? And it's not just Weber. Showrunner J.D. Payne also told Time that criticism of Galadriel wearing armor and the inclusion of a black elf will not be tolerated. Well, look, Galadriel didn't wear armor because the things that she's doing in Rings of Power are not the things that she did in the Second Age. If you'd actually read the material, you would know this. You're having her do things that, well, basically male characters did, but you don't want to show the male characters doing those because you need a woman to be the protagonist. You need your female hero. You need this to be fantasy tokenism, and you're achieving your goals, I will admit. He described critics ironically quoting Tolkien as creatures of dull and lumpish nature that had no more language than beasts. Yeah, so people who actually read Tolkien and quote him and use that to argue why it doesn't make sense that you're making the decisions that you're making, they're obviously the dull, lumpish beast. Definitely not you, who's just sort of winging it here. Let's be clear here, it is not racist to want characters that are described by J.R.R. Tolkien in a certain way to look like those characters when his stories are being adapted to television. That's 100% bang on, right? If you have a character who has been described and then you decide to make them look completely different, it just doesn't make sense. When the description has already been given, why would you take that and decide to race swap, gender swap, or why would you just inject your own characters when you have Tolkien's characters to work with? Now I get it that you're going to have to introduce some background characters, but at the same time, it's interesting that all the background characters that they're inventing are people of color, are women, those types of things. As an example, of course, no one wants Black Panther to be played by Ryan Gosling. They want Black Panther to be played by a black man because he always has been, and that's how he is in the comic books. That is the canon. No one would want Bruce Lee to be played by Chuck Norris. They want him to be played by an Asian man. YouTuber Just Some Guy more eloquently explains Middle-earth is basically northwestern Europe, mostly England. The native people of those areas are all white, so all the races of Middle-earth would be white. And this was an allegory. This was meant to be, basically tales and myths of England that Tolkien was trying to write. And we know that's true because Tolkien described what they looked like. They are all white. The actors can be non-white if they can pass as European with or without makeup. They can play those characters, he details. They just need to look the part. Casting non-white actors in a Middle-earth show is like casting white actors in a Black Panther movie. It makes no sense. It is also not racist or sexist to want characters like Galadriel to be portrayed on the screen as they are described by Tolkien in his works. But we already know they're not going to do this. We already know that they said things like, well, it only felt natural that this be a modern adaptation of Tolkien's works. But then, after admitting to all of these things, they get butthurt whenever you say that this is only vaguely connected to Tolkien, that this is not actually Tolkien's work. When they say, yeah, it's not Tolkien's work, this is a modern interpretation. This is the novel Tolkien never wrote. These are characters that Tolkien never wrote. And you say, oh, so it's just vaguely connected to Tolkien's work. Oh, no, this is Tolkien. Yeah, no, it's not. This is not fantasy. It's not Tolkien. It's your fantasy tokenism. Next up, Morfydd Clark, who seems like a nice person until she opens her mouth. Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power's Morfydd Clark admits show is a perversion of Tolkien's work, tells critics to shut the F up. So here we have again another person admitting that this is not Tolkien's work. This is the modern adaptation. This is the reimagine. This is, their identity politics injected. This is all of that stuff. And yet then again, butthurt whenever they say, oh, so it's just vaguely connected. No, this is Tolkien. No, it's not. And you can go online and search on YouTube and see many Tolkien scholars and experts explain why this is not Tolkien. Morfydd Clark, who plays Galadriel in the upcoming Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, admitted the show is a perversion of J.R.R. Tolkien's work. Clark admitted the show is a perversion while speaking to Time magazine, telling the outlet, I didn't read the books and think I wish there were more female characters because I just took it as a given that was the way things were. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't look at the books and go, oh, well, we need more female characters in this. Or look at the books and go, well, we need more of this or we need more of that. You should just read the books and enjoy the tale that is being told to you. Amazingly, Clark was right with her initial thought. The books are the way they are because that's how Tolkien wrote them. And that is the way things are in The Lord of the Rings because it is meant to be English mythology. In fact, Tolkien elaborated on the thought process about not including, for example, female orcs. There must be an orc woman, but in stories that seldom ever see the orcs except as soldiers of armies in the service of the evil lords, we naturally would not learn much about their lives. In other words, it wouldn't make sense to put orc women in here because, well, what would they be doing in this story? It makes no sense. That's what J.R.R. Tolkien was saying. Injecting other people into this story makes no sense. Leave it be. There are also significant female characters in Tolkien's work, including, of course, Clark's own Galadriel, including Éowyn and Arwen. Maybe not as significant, but other female characters include Rosie Cotton, Ioreth, Lobelia Sackville Baggins, Goldberry Haleth, Idril, Celebrimbor, Eredel, Luthien, Yavanna, Melian, and Nienna. And you want to ask, who are these people? Well, you can go online and you can look them up. Here are female characters from Lord of the Rings. So when you complain that there aren't enough female characters, maybe you should actually go and read the material instead of admitting that you didn't actually read the material or you didn't read it carefully and then, you don't know what you're doing, obviously. Here is also an entire rundown of the top 10 female characters from Lord of the Rings. So again, I think to sit here and go, oh, well, there's all these men and blah, blah, blah. That's because it's a movie about a bunch of armies and a bunch of fighting and a bunch of warriors. And guess what? If this is supposed to represent a time long before any kind of modern issues or modern takes on things, they would have been men. There are physiological reasons why that makes sense. And there are other reasons why it makes sense, but obviously they would have been men. It would not have made sense to employ a whole bunch of women in your army because, well, they're not as strong as men. I don't know why we have to constantly explain these things again and again and again. So as you see, these people, they just like to argue in circles. They like to say, oh, well, this is a modern take. Oh, but no, it's not just vaguely connected. Well, we're tightly connected. But yeah, it's a modern take where we're injecting modern ideas, modern politics, and we're injecting a bunch of modern characters that never existed in the original works. But it's not just vaguely connected. And they keep going around in circles and circles and circles. And then when you quote Tolkien back to them and ask, so why are you doing this when Tolkien specifically said that this is the description of these people, then you're a racist, or you're some sort of phobe, or you're some sort of misogynist, something like that. They like to label you as an ist so that they can dismiss your argument. And then they like to say that you are somehow, and this is absolutely rich, a creature of dull and lumpish nature that had no more language than the beasts. You know what's dull and lumpish? Dull and lumpish is people who do this same thing again with every IP, which is just going in and doing their modern interpretation, their reimagine, their what if, and then they take it and they obviously are going to race swap and gender swap a bunch of characters. They're going to inject a bunch of modern identity politics and modern characters that would not or should not have existed based on the extensive writing of the author. And then they have the gall to call you the creature who is dull and lumpish. These people, they are dull, they are lumpish, they have no intelligence, and they admit to not being very good stewards of these works. They admit to not holding to the works of Tolkien. They admit to modern interpretation. And they admit to basically creating something that is only vaguely connected. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want to continue to smash the narrative, then smash the like, subscribe, and share buttons, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.